Hi guys, welcome back to the Liberty Bunker. I really like Preeti Patel. With someone like Boris Johnson, he's a real easy target for the left. You can call him a gammon, you can call him nationalistic, you can call him a racist. He's just an easy big target. With Preeti Patel, it's somewhat more difficult for the left because she's Asian, she's female, she's a lot more right wing than say Boris Johnson. But the ad hominem attacks from the left don't really work against her because she's an Asian female, and just calling her racist, xenophobic, misogynistic doesn't really work because, of who she is. She's a great person. I don't necessarily believe with everything she says, but she does a lot of things right. And as a Home Secretary, she is pretty hard line. So let's take a look at this story here coming up from the Telegraph. Preeti Patel in row with Boris Johnson over closing Britain's borders to keep coronavirus at bay. Downing Street says there were no plans to stop flights from countries blighted by coronavirus. Take a close look at this story. Boris Johnson and Preeti Patel were embroiled in a row over closing Britain's borders as the Prime Minister refused a plea from the Home Secretary to stop flights to the UK. Ms Patel tried to build a coalition of senior cabinet ministers to put the case to Downing Street, only for Number 10 to state publicly that there were no plans to stop flights from countries blighted by coronavirus, including Iran and the US. Mr Johnson was angry that Home Office discussions of a border lockdown disclosed in the Daily Telegraph had been made public, according to Whitehall sources. The Home Secretary was concerned that flights were still being allowed to land in the UK from coronavirus hotspots including Tehran, New York, Rome and Beijing. Although visitors arriving from such countries were asked to self-isolate for 14 days when they arrived in the UK, there is no way of checking they are doing so, and passengers are simply trusted to do the right thing. Britain does not screen passengers for symptoms of coronavirus. Senior cabinet ministers were understood to have split over the issue when it was initially raised by the government. Matt Hancock, the health secretary, among ministers who had expressed reservations in the past about flights arriving from Iran and other countries. Mr Johnson, however, came down firmly on the side of Dominic Raab, the foreign secretary, who warned that stopping flights would mean an end to the ongoing repatriations of British tourists who had all been told to come home. Foreign Office sources suggested banning flights would be purely symbolic measure with significant downside attached, including Britons trapped abroad. So it's a difficult one. Now, I just think, are we taking stopping the spread of this virus seriously or not? I've said from the beginning, I'm no expert in this field. It certainly is obvious we're going to do a hell of a lot of damage to the economy by closing the economy pretty much at the moment. Certainly for the next 3 weeks, we're in a lockdown state. How long that goes on for, it's likely to be, from what Boris Johnson and the US government have said, at least some measures of social distancing for the next year or 18 months. It's going to take a hell of a toll on the economy. Potentially the deaths associated with an economic downturn will quite probably be higher than the deaths associated with the virus itself. Now, there seems to be a disjointing of communications. They're saying here that if you come, for instance, from China, Tehran, Rome, New York, one of these hotspots of coronavirus, you're told to self-isolate. Now, how does that really work? Because if you're either a foreign national or you're a Brit coming back from abroad, it's going to be very difficult to self-isolate because more than likely you're probably going to go into a household with other people. So if you do have coronavirus, no one's screening you for the virus, any symptoms. They're only asking you to self-isolate. That's great. I mean, no one's really going out in the UK at the moment anyway. But if you go into a house with, say, 5 other people in it, you might have coronavirus and you spread it to 5 other people. So the argument, just there's no problem, just fly back from China and just self-isolate, doesn't really work, because that only works if you go into a building, a home, where no one else lives. That's not really the option for a lot of people. It just seems the whole communication from the government is very disjointed. It was only two weeks ago we were being told by the government they're not going to be closing large events. 2-3 weeks ago they wouldn't close like large sporting events because the risk of transferring coronavirus at a sporting event is low. Now we've swung so far the other way that the police are now saying if you're sitting in a park, even if you're sitting down in a park like 2-3 meters away from the nearest person, they will move you on because the threat of spreading is so great. You can't even sit in a park like 2-3 meters away from the nearest person. It's just weird how quickly it's swung. It seems disjointed. I mean, I'm sure the government have something of a plan, whether it's the right plan, whether this plan will destroy the economy. I don't know, if the threat to the economy, if the threat of spreading this virus is so great, surely it makes sense at this point just to close the borders. I mean, that's other countries that seem to be containing this virus successfully. That seems to be what they've done. Just stop everybody coming in. Maybe let people out if you want to. I mean, that's another country's problem, right? But at least stop everybody coming in. Then, a proper good quality track and trace method. I mean, it's really too late for that now. If we look at everything, South Korea seems to be the country that's done everything right, or at least being as close to doing everything right as possible. It seems to be South Korea that should have been, it turns out now, it should have been the model we should have adopted, because that really protected the economy. It remains to be seen how much damage is done to the economy now. It's going to be big. Of course, it's going to be big. But it's just an interesting one. Priti Patel versus Boris Johnson. In which side are you on? I don't necessarily agree with Priti or Boris, but I think if what we're being told is true and the measures that the UK are taking, you can't even sit in the park because the risk to life is so great, surely we should close the borders. I mean, that just makes sense. I mean, my ultimate opinion is we should do as much to protect the economy as we can, because when the economy goes down the tubes, more people will die, whether it's suicide, whether it's like losing a business, whether it's just, increased poverty costs more lives, right? So, I don't know, it's just a difficult one. Priti Patel, I mean, she could come off very well off the back of this. She could be future Prime Minister. I mean, if Boris Johnson does fall because of the actions he's taken, if they are seen in the future to have been incompetent decisions made that have cost thousands of lives, maybe the UK will be looking for a new Prime Minister 6 months, a year down the road. Whether that happens, I don't know. But if it does happen, Priti Patel's lined herself up quite well. The benefit of hindsight, looking back on what's happening over these period of weeks, in 6 months or years down the road, people say, well, Priti got it right, let's have her for PM. I don't know, it's just a thought. I mean, Boris Johnson has a lot of problems up against him at the moment. Certainly don't envy him. But yeah, Priti Patel, could she be a future Prime Minister? Are the government doing the right thing by allowing flights coming into the UK from coronavirus hotspots? In my opinion, it's one thing we should have locked down nearly 3 months ago now, right? So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Jason from Liberty Bunkers sign off. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one, and I'll see you in the next video.